To discuss the quest to get Americans out of Gaza and back home, we're bringing in retired Lieutenant Commander at the Office of Naval Intelligence, Stephen Rogers. Lieutenant Rogers, thank you for your time this morning.
Oh, you're welcome.
Is the United States doing enough to get Americans out of Gaza?
Well, at this point we are. The objective is to get them out alive. But one thing must be understood, and I know it's very difficult for people who have never been in war or in the military to understand. We're dealing with terrorists. We're dealing with animals. They have no regard for any human life. So the only way we're going to be able to get them out, at least in the future, if negotiations don't work, is to use as much military might as we can. These terrorists must be decapitated. They must be destroyed.
So when you say military might, do you anticipate an actual U.S. intervention in the Middle East?
I do, and sadly to say, it's going to come to that because don't forget, we have Iran involved, you have Russia involved, you have China involved, you have a new axis of evil, unlike anything we've ever seen before. And the United States of America has the military might to end this by helping the Israelis, but sooner or later we're going to get involved.
These Americans, they want to flee, but is Hamas preventing them from leaving?
Well, not only do the Americans want to flee and Hamas is preventing them from fleeing, but they're preventing their own people, the Palestinian people, from fleeing. Again, no regard for any human life. They've enslaved their people, they've harmed their people, and now they're using their people as well as the hostages as human shields.
So what should be done about this?
Complete and total annihilation of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of these terrorist groups. And by the way, we might as well add Iran to the list. They've been a sponsor of terrorism for as long as I've been living. They have killed Americans. They have killed people from different countries around the world. Well, it's time to kill them.
So how does that work? Getting Americans out of Gaza. There's a couple crossings. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy around whether or not those are open.
Well, look, to begin with, you're going to use your military might. You're going to use strategy and tactics. Remember shock and awe in Iraq? Well, that's what's going to have to be done here. And again, it must be emphasized that the Israeli government, as well as the United States government, we do everything we can to protect innocent people, to protect civilians. But unfortunately, we have a terrorist organization that has decided to use those civilians as part of their war machine to protect themselves.
Do you anticipate any way for the U.S. to use other Arab nations as a way to broker some negotiations to get these Americans out?
I believe that's going on as we speak. There are some Arab nations that are probably involved behind the scenes doing a lot of talking. But I've got to tell you, at this point, it's going to be very tough to negotiate with animals that decide that they could just go anywhere on the face of the earth, let alone Israel, and torture, maim, kill, and behead people and kill babies.
Let's look at history here. Are there any situations like this that have happened before where Americans are in a war zone?
Yes, as recently as Afghanistan, we've had Iraq. We do have Americans in Africa where there is fighting, what you could say is a war zone with terrorists. So this is nothing new with regard to Americans being in war zones. What is new is the fact that you have a terrorist group now using these Americans as leverage to negotiate in the future or as human shields to protect themselves.
So what happened in those other cases?
Well, when you're fighting an enemy that is sponsored by a country, you could pretty much go in and do a lot of negotiation. In some of those cases, it took special forces to go in and take people out, but never at the scale as we're seeing right now. The difference is going to be the military might that the United States has in the region is showing what may happen, which means a wider regional war that nobody wants, but my guess it may come to that.
Of course, it's very difficult to predict these kinds of things in advance, but do you think that this will cause the United States to be more vigilant about issuing warnings for Americans not to go to places where a situation like this may arise?
Well, yeah, I think we have to be vigilant more so with regard to terrorism in total. I'm really concerned about what's being prepared to do damage here. Don't forget, we have an open border, thousands of people who've crossed that border, young men, if you will, that we can't find. So I know a lot of focus has been on the Mideast, but I'm worried about one big thing that could happen here. We could end up focusing on the battlefields right here on the streets of America if we're not vigilant and warn Americans right here to wake up. And if you see something, you better darn say something.
Lieutenant Rogers, these are 500 to 600 Americans that are within the confines of Gaza, and obviously Israel has somewhat of a blockade around there. So do you think there needs to be dialogue between the United States and Israel to open that up?
Well, there has been, and it's ongoing, but we've got to be very careful. When you open up a border, if you will, like Gaza, you may be opening up the entrance of more terrorists. It's a very difficult situation that the Israelis is in. But I could tell you, they're doing everything they can, that is the Israeli government, to get food, water, and aid into the area to help the civilians that are trapped there.
It's very great hearing your analysis. Retired Lieutenant Commander Stephen Rogers at the Office of Naval Intelligence. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.